Hello, Gerard.
Hi, Rod.
So we're here today to talk about the social contract.
Yes, we are.
And we're going to look at the social contract from three different political philosophers: Hobbes, Thomas Hobbes,
Mm-hmm.
John Locke, and Jean-Jacques Rousseau. Okay,
It's
so
Jean-Jacques.
how's my French? How's my accent? so
Spot on.
Spot on. Thank you. Well, you have a little bit of French in you, don't you? You got Armand. Is that a French last name that you got there?
My name is 100% French. Gérard Jacques Armand.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And ironically, it was the only subject I failed at school.
so I'm assuming your father is
So my father has some
French.
yes, French ancestry, but we didn't speak it at all in the house.
Right, he was a Brit. I mean, he was culturally a Brit.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
But finished his life in France. He bought an old flour mill and lived in France for, I don't know, 10, 20 years.
Is that right?
Big patch of land with a 17th century flour mill.
Oh wow, that sounds like idyllic. Have you visited a few times?
I did, yeah. He intended to convert it from a 17th century into something more modern, but didn't quite get around to it.
It didn't get around to it.
He lived pretty rustically, pretty simply.
All right, sounds good. Sounds like what we should all be doing, all striving for.
Yeah.
All right, so Gerard, will you please tell us what is the social contract? Why don't we start off with Hobbes's idea, since I believe he's the oldest of the figures we're talking about, right? I mean, I think historically Hobbes is the first of those three, right?
Yeah, 1651 he wrote Leviathan during the English Civil War. So the social contract is the relationship between people and government, put succinctly. And they had very different ideas about that relationship in terms of how much freedom people should give up to their governments and rulers in exchange for security and protection. So that's what we're looking at. Hobbes believed that human nature is inherently destructive. If left to their own devices, humans would have violence and chaos. Society would disintegrate. In his book, Leviathan, he wrote, "In the state of nature, people are in that condition which is called war. In such condition, there is no place for industry, no culture, no art, no letters, no society, and which is worst of all, continual fear and danger of violent death, and the life of man solitary, poor, nasty, brutish, and short." That's his most famous line: nasty, brutish, and short.
Yep.
So without government, that's the life we lead. So in terms of the social contract, he believed the most important thing was to have a very strong authoritative figure, which he called the Leviathan. People would voluntarily give up their freedom, knowing that the alternative would be chaos and violence. And I believe his preferred method was a monarch. And once again, he was writing during the Civil War. The English monarch had just been beheaded. We had no king, so that probably influenced him.
Yes.
That is Hobbes.
All right. So the contract is at the heart of it. It sounds like it's about an agreement between the people and having some sort of state that exists, whether it be a monarchy or it doesn't so much matter on the style, even if you had a preference, right? In which the people surrender some degree of power for the sake of having a centralized decision maker of some kind, right, on behalf of the whole society.
And it would be an authoritative figure. Yeah.
Right. But where does that authority come from? That authority is somehow granted by the people somehow, right?
Well, no, because monarchs get their power just through succession, don't they? Just being next in line. That's not given. It's certainly not voted by the people. But yeah, they don't revolt. Put it that way. So in that way, they are agreeing to have the figure.
Mm-hmm. But at a more fundamental, elementary level, there's some sort of agreement that we need a state of some kind, and that
Oh yeah, absolutely.
somebody has to make a decision on behalf of others. Right?
Absolutely, and even a bad monarch is better than no monarch or no leader. So
yeah. Okay, good.
Yeah.
So that's the foundational view of what the social contract is, right? Coming from Thomas Hobbes.
Yeah.
An agreement between people and a government of whatever kind. Okay?
Mm-hmm.
So what does Locke have to say about this?
Yeah. So John Locke, similar time as Hobbes, he was writing, but he had very different views. He put forward more classical liberalism, religious tolerance. He believed that people were born with a tabula rasa. Have you heard of that?
Yeah.
A blank slate.
Mm-hmm.
That you're basically shaped by experience in life. So very different to Hobbes. Hobbes believed man was inherently bad, and Locke disagreed. You're born with a blank slate, no inherent anger or destructive tendencies.
Mm-hmm.
And if people are left to their own devices, they'll find a way to better themselves and better society as a whole. So you should give as much freedom as possible to the people.
Mm-hmm.
So again, very different from Hobbes.
Mm-hmm.
He believed the utmost importance in society was a limited government, promote people's life, liberty, and property.
Mm-hmm.
He wrote, men being naturally free, equal, and independent, no one can deprive them of this freedom and subject it to the political power of someone else without his own consent.
Mm-hmm.
The only way anyone can strip off his natural liberty is for him to agree with other men to unite in a community so as to live together comfortably, safe, and peaceably. So, free to enjoy their rights and freedoms, but also free to select their leaders. He believed in a representative democracy. So, what we have in most Western liberal countries, you vote for politicians, and then for 5 years they make those decisions.
Mm-hmm.
That's representative democracy.
Mm-hmm.
They make the laws. And he also felt if those leaders are not acting in our interest, then we should have the power to overthrow them. Mm-hmm. So I think many believe that the American Revolution was affected greatly by Locke's ideas.
Yeah.
That if it comes in the form of a revolution, then that's what must be done if those leaders are not acting in your interest. Ideally, it comes more in the form of elections, but he was not against revolution.
Mm-hmm.
And that is John Locke, quite
Okay.
different from Hobbes. Limited government, liberty. Yeah.
Well, I have to go back to Hobbes. Did Hobbes actually argue that there should be an authoritarian form of government, or was he just saying in a basic sense that whatever the government style is, there needs to be some kind of a state, and that it really comes down to decision making? That was the way I understood Hobbes. Is like it all comes down to having a centralized decision maker somehow, and Locke is more like limited government, but I think Hobbes also would have supported a limited government as long as there was a state of some kind where the decision maker was invested with an authority to make decisions on behalf of of others. But Locke is much more like minimalistic, which I think most people, at least in America, well, no, I'm going to take that back. I was going to say most people in America would agree with that, but I don't think that's actually true, at least anymore. We have a political faction on the left who wants a huge government to, make even small decisions for people's lives, paternalism and all that. So there's something dangerous about the minimal form of government, isn't there? Where people are really free to do virtually anything that they want.
Yeah, and don't a lot of people disagree with democracy now in America? Aren't there polls that show a lot of people?
Yeah, I think we're entering kind of a new phase. I think of of sentiment. I think in this country where on the right you have outright desire for fascism, right? Not all people on the right, but there's people who wanted Trump, for example, to steal this election, right? I mean,
a strong leader.
We don't care. This is the guy I want, and we don't care how he gets power as long as it's him, right? So yeah, that's anti-democratic for sure.
Yeah.
But I see it on the left too, right? There's such a strong impulse for a centralized government that is basically socialistic in nature, right? Where it's it seems to me that they want some central planner, to dole out resources to people. And there's something very undemocratic about that as well. So, I would say that democracy could be, I don't know what the future holds, of course, but it could be teetering on the brink of extinction here.
Well, yeah, I've heard that there are people on both sides who feel the other side are an existential threat, and if that's the case, then of course democracy can go if that existential threat is gone. So, yeah,
that's always been true in American politics, though, right? I mean, the two sides have always called each other an existential threat, and it's completely untrue, right? I mean, this is just where human nature just goes to the extreme so quickly, so fast. But de Tocqueville pointed that out back in the 1830s and 40s, right? That when election time came in America, it was the two sides basically saying that the American experiment will end if the other side wins, And so far, that hasn't been the case. But it seems now we're entering a new level of extremism where it really could be the case, particularly in the sense that rejecting the outcomes of elections now has become normalized, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it's happened on both sides now. I mean, yes, Trump made up a big lie that people either believe in, either naively or cynically. They know he lost, but they don't care. They just want him to be president. But also on the left, we had a candidate in Georgia, Stacey Abrams, who also refused to acknowledge her loss in 2020, and she still never conceded. So now it's been normalized on both sides, which is very concerning for this next cycle.
Dangerous.
Yeah. Okay, so moving on here to our next thing. So we've covered Hobbes and Locke. What about Rousseau? Mr. Rousseau, man is born free, but everywhere he's in chains, right? What was his view on all this, on the social contract?
Yeah, so that's his most famous line: "Man is born free, but everywhere he is in chains." So social structures that have been set up lead to corruption, is what Rousseau thought. Lead to jealousy and the disintegration of society.
Hmm.
So if you strip away all these elements, the social structures, you have people being free together in equality, making decisions for what is best for the community, or for what Rousseau called the general will.
Yeah.
Laws are made directly by the people. So I think this is a difference from Locke, who believed in representative democracy, Rousseau's more direct democracy. Like the Brexit referendum, you vote on an issue every time. And yeah, sometimes you might get your way in that system, sometimes you might not, but it is the community who decided.
Yeah.
And that is Rousseau.
Okay, so he wanted
So
more of a direct democracy.
more direct. I think that's the main difference, yeah, you could say.
But then what happens? So what would his view be if you don't get your way? Like if I voted for, I don't want marijuana to be legal in Colorado, and I voted against it, and it still happened, then what does that
Well, it's
mean?
the general will. Like the other people got their way, and you accept that because the majority. And then you would fight for it again. You'd say, okay, let's convince people and have another vote somewhere down the line, I suppose.
Sure.
But you accept that losing sometimes is better than having a state making the rules.
Uh-huh.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, a lot more freedom with Jean-Jacques.
Yeah. Yeah, I like the referendum idea. We have that in Colorado. We vote directly on issues here often, including marijuana. That's how it became legal. It was through referendum.
Yeah, I mean, you got to be careful with referendums. So a lot of countries they say it's got to be a 60% or higher to actually make a change. It's got to be 60%, and that's why people complained about Brexit, that we didn't have that rule. It was 50%, or 51% was all you needed.
I know.
And
that was that was not a good scene.
And it was all done in 6 weeks. It was too quick for anyone to know really the ins and outs. I prefer the idea of you pick 100 people in a jury-like system and give them all the facts, put them in a room, and then they give their views to the lawmakers.
Yeah.
At least people are knowledgeable about what's going on, and then that happens.
So do you think the UK will re-enter now that Johnson's gone?
No. It was so painful and so long. It was 3-4 years of just going over and over the same thing, and I don't think people have got the stomach for it.
To go
anyone who comes out and says, I'm gonna, I want to take us back in, I don't think would win. However disastrous economically it might be, and enough people still feel, take back control, make our own laws. It's not the EU making laws, which of course we were part of, but yeah. So no, I don't think. I mean, in 20 years, of course, it's a generation. I kind of back that it's a generational thing. You can't keep voting.
Yeah.
In out. I mean,
Yeah. No, you're right. And frankly, there are benefits of being your own country and not, I mean, not that you weren't your own country before, but there are benefits of not being part of it too, right? I mean, you have a lot more sovereignty, and you don't have to, follow any rules that are made, by a larger entity. And
I think it's the trading is the big problem.
That's the hard.
We used to trade freely with our closest neighbors, and now there's a lot of paperwork and taxes, and just businesses are not bothering anymore. It's just too much hard work, which is a shame. I mean, Norway are not in the EU, but they're still part of a free trading system. So we could have stayed in that, and that was the disappointing thing, I think.
And I think they tried, right? Wasn't that Theresa May's?
Yeah.
She was trying to do that, and she couldn't do it, and then they just went hard Brexit, right?
Hard Brexit.
Yeah. Wow. Well, the world is disintegrating in that way, right? I mean, 20 or 30 years ago, it seemed like we were globalizing, and that just is not true anymore, right? It could be that human beings just came to realize that when you create organizations that are too big, they just don't work. Actually, they just fall apart. Too many people get left behind. I mean, that's what happened here, right? That we were globalizing. We had Clinton globalizing, Obama, all about globalization. And what the reality was, despite all the experts saying, "Oh, this will be good for everybody," in the end, it really wasn't. It wasn't good for a lot of people in this country. And Trump came along and said, "We're going to freaking isolate and bring back manufacturing jobs, and we're going to bring back, we're going to take care of this country first." And he had a point, man.
Did he bring back jobs?
I don't think we have, as a result of that movement, but I don't think he was directly. I don't think in his tenure a lot of that was happening, but we have definitely moved back into that, and like Tesla's a good example. They make a lot of their cars right here in the USA, and I think American made is really something a lot of people value here now, and it was important because what are those people supposed to do, right? I mean, if you have all these people who just lose their jobs to all these cheap factories in China or whatever, it was really negatively impacting a lot of communities in this country, despite all the promises of the experts that this was going to be good for everybody. It didn't pan out that way, So yeah. Okay, good. Well, Gerard, thank you for your insights into the social contract. Any thoughts about how it's looking today in terms of the social contract and what it means moving forward from this point forward?
I'll give a conclusion, Rod. I did take a lot of this from a very good YouTube channel, which I should mention, but I don't have it to mind.
Okay.
But very good stuff. Anyway, this was the conclusion of this YouTube channel. Most liberal democracies are going to look loosely like Locke's ideas of government, protecting personal freedom and property. To what extent should we allow government to limit our freedom in exchange for security? That is the ongoing question. Yes. The push and pull. Yeah. They limit our freedom in exchange for security, and no one has the answer to that.
Yeah.
People have different views.
Yeah. Well, I guess it's really a toss-up between liberal democracies and China, right?
Mm-hmm.
People give up much more freedom for security.
Yeah, that's right.
And it works. I mean, and it does work, right? Inside of China, nobody can deny that it is not a well-functioning place, actually.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Well, you've been there. You worked there a lot, right?
Yeah.
Had your teaching camps there, yeah.
Yep. Yeah. It's they in many ways they have figured it out. I have to say, and in some ways they haven't, right? I mean, they do not have nearly the freedom that we have, and there is a tremendous amount of propaganda in their brains. There is just a tremendous amount of. They're censored like crazy and all that. Okay, all of that is very negative in my view, but what they get in exchange is a life that is free of many of the worries that we have here. And so, and the final thing about that it's a whole different vision of what equality is, right? Like here, you're equal under the law. That's the philosophy here. But in China, people are equalized in a different way. The government treats the citizens equally. In most, I mean, I know they have like the ethnic minorities that are not treated equally, and there's really a lot of human rights abuses happening over there in that way. But if you're like a Han Chinese person, you are basically treated the same. And so there is a level of there's another kind of equality there that, and I just think the future is just going to be a toss up between those two models, you know, and which one's going to win out. I have no idea.
Yeah.
But all right, good. So shall we stop it here then, Gerard? I'll stop the.
Okay, Rob. Cheers.